when I looked at my goals and where I wanted to be at that time, the way to fast track that is through short-term rentals. And that, I think that is why so many people have gravitated towards it in the last 3 years, is because they've realized how much these short-term rentals can actually make.
This is your daily real estate syndication show. I'm your host, Whitney Sewell. Today, our guest has a syndication model that I don't think we've talked about on the show before. His name is Alex Jarbo. He's a short-term rental developer and manager. And while we don't go into a ton about short-term rentals today, we do talk about how he got into this development business, but how he got into syndicating short-term rentals and developing them as well. I think it's a pretty cool business model, how he scaled the short-term rental model that so many people are gravitating towards right now. He's the founder of Sargon Investments, and he has a goal of developing 650 cabins in the next 3 years. Alex holds an MBA with a concentration in real estate development and is currently finishing a doctorate in business with a concentration in leadership. So Alex goes through, how he got to where he's at, of course, but it's really cool. Military background, he loved the cash flow from short-term rentals, but he wanted to do it much bigger than most, and he's doing it. So it's a really cool story. I know you're going to learn a lot and be encouraged. Alex, welcome to the show. You are one of very few short-term rental people I've had on the show who are actually syndicating short-term rental projects and developing I would consider pretty large, short-term rental properties. I think it's a very unique business model that you have. I'm looking forward to getting into that. Tell the listeners a little more about who you are and how do you become a syndicator of short-term rental development projects?
Yeah, so I'm a little bit of background about me. I served 4.5 years in the Marine Corps. During my last year in the military, I decided to learn more about real estate, and I sort of gravitated a little bit more towards short-term rentals. I had contacted a couple people that I'd watched some YouTube videos about back in 2015, and I was just very interested in short-term rentals. A lot of people I was contacting had like short-term rentals, saying like in Gatlinburg and Pigeon Forge. And one of the people on that ran one of the YouTube channels had helped me sort of find different markets I wanted to move to. I was pretty dedicated. I'm originally from Detroit, Michigan. I didn't want to move back to Detroit. So I decided on Asheville, which is where I currently live, and got my real estate license, help people buy and sell. And I realized a lot of people, I'd already moved here for the short-term rentals, but a lot of people were already like that I was helping were already purchasing and selling short-term rentals. So started looking for a property to purchase with my VA loan. That was like, I was looking for like a duplex or a triplex where I could live in one and rent out, essentially like house hack, but with short-term rentals. So I couldn't really find anything on the market. At least that was in my price range at the time. So I just decided my very first property my very first investment property was a ground up development, custom built ground up development, which is usually not the way that goes. But so we started with that first one, and then we started building two more right after that. And then after the two, I was sort of pretty capped out on my finances in terms of like the loans I could get. So I took on my first investor, which was a joint venture deal, and then a couple more investors that we did joint ventures. And then it got to a point where I realized that I just sat down. I was like, what's the best use of my time? Because like a lot of times I was driving around looking at 30, 40 properties just to purchase one piece of land. And it started to get a little bit more intensive. We still do like the development of like eight to maybe 6 to 10 cabins with like a joint venture structure with maybe one or two investors. But right now we sort of switched over to the syndication model where like we're developing these boutique like resort communities that we rent out on Airbnb and VRBO and the other short-term rental sites. But yeah, it just came from what's the best use of my time, and the best use of my time is developing like these 40 to 50 unit cabin communities in the mountains right now where I can raise money for these projects. And I mean, everyone's gravitating toward short-term rentals right now because a lot of the cap rates are a little bit compressed right now. So
yeah, no, that's awesome. First, I just want to say thank you for your service, and
thank you, sir.
I appreciate that. Just always want to honor those that have served and grateful. But you talked about, or actually, before I get into that, I want to ask you why short-term rentals, versus, I guess, why did you start to focus on short-term rentals? Not like this moment as far as in the market cycle and everybody focusing on short-term, like you just said, but why did you gravitate in the beginning to short-term rentals versus, say, buying that triplex, fourplex with your, with your VA loan, and just renting them out long term? What was that about short-term rentals for you?
Right. So we have just looking behind you, we have a lot of similar books on our bookshelves in terms of
we do. I can see them on yours.
and like with real estate too. So I sat down and probably read, I don't know, but at that time, like at this point, I probably read like over 100 real estate books. But at that time, maybe about 30 or 40 real estate books. And I mean, only one of them was geared towards short-term rentals because there wasn't really too much information out there on them. But what I realized was like reading the multifamily books, reading the flipping books, reading the single family house long-term rental books. The cash flows were like you're lucky to get anywhere between $300 to $600 cash flow per property. And what I was seeing on the back end of like some of these people who I was reaching out to, the types of cash flows they were getting, it wasn't even close. It was like owning 5 to 10 single family houses compared to owning one cabin. So that's when I looked at my goals and where I wanted to be at that time, the way to fast track that is through short-term rentals. And that, I think that is why so many people have gravitated towards it in the last 3 years, is because they've realized how much these short-term rentals can actually make, especially the unique ones, like the ones that are cabins, A-frames, or some type of that are unique in terms of like the design, if they're like condos or something. So people have, cat's out of the bag, like they cash flow phenomenally. And that's what, and right now it's like with there being like a shortage of inventory and blah, blah, blah. And a lot of people coming from like the long-term rental side who are saying, hey, I just want like a 10% cap rate. I'll be happy with that. And I think that's why prices have been driven up a little bit, but yeah, just the cash flow to answer the first question.
No, so it was really that simple. I mean, ultimately you notice just more cash flow, but tell me about then the process of just the being able to scale it, right? I mean, it sounds like I don't know too many people, or maybe anybody that I can think of right off that's scaled the short-term rental business where they're developing a $10+ million project, right? Around short-term rentals. Speak to, it's interesting that your first project was a development, and maybe you can start there, maybe some, why was the first project a development, and how did you know that was something you could tackle to where you're scale, and then move into scaling to syndicating these same types of deals?
Yeah, I didn't want to purchase a property that was just a normal house that I could just put on the short-term rental sites, which still do pretty well right now. And all the properties that were either cabins or something unique about them that would do well as a short-term rental, they were just way too expensive compared to, I had a builder friend who ended up building my first project. We had like just figured out like price per square foot and everything. And our first project was an A-frame, and it was like a 900 square foot A-frame that grossed like 81,000 last year and then netted like 50 grand. So that's sort of why I gravitated towards the development side was that it was like at the time we could build them cheaper. And even right now, it's obviously things have gotten way more expensive with COVID and stuff with like both labor and cost of materials. But there's no inventory for short-term rentals right now, at least in the hot market. So it still makes sense to develop the short-term rentals over just purchasing.
Like even that first project, or even to now, but especially that first one, how did you know or have confidence in what the land was, the value of the land was, and to that, knowing that, hey, we can go build something, with things that are happening with materials and material costs or shortages. Where did that confidence come from to say, you know what, I am going to buy this land and we're going to move forward with developing this?
Yeah, so my first one was around like 2017, when I started looking for the land. I leaned pretty heavily on my real estate agent and this is what I always tell people, is figure out like what an acre goes for in your area. We're developing in more rural areas, maybe about 15, 20 minutes away from the city, but we also live in an area that people are used to driving. So like it's a drive-in city, our airport's not really that big. So they're comfortable making that drive, especially like we're known for like hiking trails and waterfalls and stuff. So people are used to driving 45 minutes to an hour to even get to these locations. But yeah, figuring out price per acre is a big thing starting off, and then figuring out like price per square foot with your builder. And then from there, just this, I keep saying unique properties, but like unique properties is what's gonna market your property very easily on the short-term rental site. So I say Instagrammable properties is what you want. Like people who are excited to stay in your house, where it's not just a place that they're sleeping, where the property is an experience in and itself, outside of like the city that they're visiting to.
Nice. That's something to think about right there. Instagrammable property. Yeah, but the unique property experience, I like that, versus just the surrounding, the things that you can't change,
Right.
really. You
Right.
can change that property. So you mentioned you started driving around, you're looking at 30, 40 properties or more, just to buy one, but there's really this, like best use of time issue, right? What is the best use of time? How did that change? Like, how did you change that to where you're not driving around looking at 50 properties to buy one? What happened there?
One was, I got a real estate development mentor to sort of help me really focus in on what my goals need to be, or where I need to be, or what I need to be doing right now to where I need to be at maybe in a couple of years. And when you start purchasing some of these larger parcels, there aren't as many of those on the market as, say, like maybe 1 to 5 acres. So take for instance, like there would probably be at any given time 300 to 400 of those like acre to 5 acre parcels on the market, compared to like where we're purchasing anywhere between 40 to 100 acres right now. There's only maybe like 60 of those on the market. So a lot of the times I won't even drive out to the property without doing my research on the computer. And what that looks like is, we live in the mountains, where we operate in the mountains. So we're looking at how steep the land is through our county website. And then they have certain parameters that determine if we're going to be in something called a steep slope ordinance or a protected ridge ordinance that we usually don't build in, because it takes way more time to get extra permits. And then it also costs more to like beef up the foundation when we're building at a certain elevation. So that's one way to completely like just decide if I'm even going to drive out to the property. And another thing too is making sure for people who are actually wanting to do this themselves, or if they're looking to purchase property, is the drive up to the property is very important. You don't want your guests to be driving 20, 30 minutes down a gravel road. And you might see a listing and you're like, this is absolutely beautiful. Like, why is it priced at way below market or whatever? More than likely, it's probably going to be the drive, because you don't want your guests to be annoyed by the time they even get to your property. A lot of times they're driving in at night. It's going to be a new area that they're not used to. And so that's, once I decide to go out and look at a property, that's the first thing on my mind is like, what's the guest going to be thinking about as they're driving to this property? So a way to fix that is just to invest in property that's off of like a double lane state maintained road, a paved state maintained road. And then you can put in your own road. Like, we'll put in anywhere between like quarter mile to half a mile of road to get to the house.
Hey guys, it's Whitney. I wanted to take some time to introduce you to my good friends over at PassiveInvesting.com. They're a national private equity real estate firm based out of the Carolinas. They focus on acquiring institutional quality apartments and self-storage facilities. They do this with private accredited investor funds. They have a portfolio of over $700 million in assets and control over $250 million in equity from their investors. PassiveInvesting.com makes it easy for you to start investing in real estate without all the hassles. They even have an average 62% repeat investor rate in each offering they put together. They even have a real estate debt fund that offers hard money loans to local fix and flippers across the U.S., which currently has a 0% default rate. To help you learn more, they've put together a free passive investor guide that outlines the 7 red flags for passive apartment and self-storage investing. Visit PassiveInvesting.com/red flags to download the PDF now. That's PassiveInvesting.com/red flags. Nice. No, that's some great things to think about. And I want to get into some of those specifics in a moment too, about just short-term rentals, some tips that you have. But can you share an example of a deal you're syndicating maybe, or some things that to consider? Maybe the listeners thinking about syndicating, some type of short-term rental, or this is intriguing them. Speak to maybe a current project or a past project that you syndicated, and what that looks like, the type of land, maybe in the, what type of buildings are you putting on there, homes, or, what are you building?
Yeah. Just like for the people who are listening, just on the syndication side and raising money for development in general, like just understanding that there is more risk involved, like, especially with coming out of COVID now, or at least like things settling down a little bit, where like things can go wrong. Like there is more risk there, but there is more reward. That's why we're doing what we're doing. But when it comes to the syndication side, we're raising the capital just like a normal syndication. And I've leaned pretty heavily on the multifamily model to establish what we're doing here. But like our very first, larger joint venture that we did it was a $2 million project, 6 cabins right next to each other, and where the investors had put up almost all the capital. And it was just a trust thing. Just with multifamily or anything, just making sure that your investors trust you, that even if they're accredited, just making sure that they understand the process up front, that, I mean, that you need to understand the process. And that comes from like if you need to get a specific permit with the county, like we needed a specific vacation rental complex permit with our county. That took about 3 months. So just really really making sure that you understand what your county or city requires for short-term rentals. That's probably the most important thing when it comes to syndicating deals like this. It's just, I mean, just being upfront with your investors and telling them, hey, like it's going to take this long to develop these projects. Are you comfortable with that? Like having your money tied up there.
Yeah,
it's not like a multifamily project where it probably will cash flow right out of the bat if you're not doing any rehab work, or even if you're updating some of the units. Most of the units are still rented out or something. So it's not like hitting the ground running with stuff like that. And we do invest in properties where like it'll be like a cabin and maybe there's like 10 to 15 acres attached to it, where we'll maybe have plans to develop another 10 cabins next to it. That is more like a break even thing, where like we do break even on the holding costs for the whole development project. Like I said before we started this interview, it's very creative, and every project's going to be different that we do with our investors. So.
Yeah, no, it's just such an interesting model. You mentioned like maybe only 60 properties like that on the market. That's like fit for, what'd you say, 40 to 100 acres roughly. I mean, is that like nationwide? Is that like in a certain area that you're looking?
Yeah, that's within our county.
Oh, in your county. Okay.
Yeah, in our county. Yeah, which is still a lot. I mean, that's a good number but again, like I would say 70% of them are in that steep slope ordinance that we were talking about. And then we also have plans on getting the beauty about the mountains is you can drive an hour in any direction and you're in a completely different market. Like hour and a half to us is like Pigeon Forge, Gatlinburg, the Smoky Mountains and stuff. So we do have plans on getting into other markets that I've identified that I believe are up and coming. Asheville's very competitive right now in terms of both properties and land. But yeah, we do have plans on getting onto other like mountain markets that are within hour and a half to us, which, I mean, there's probably about 10 of them. And then I've looked at 2 of them that I've decided to go into. So.
Okay, awesome. Yeah. Speak to maybe the market selection there. How do you know that it's a market that you're willing to, go buy, 100 acres in and start a development for short-term rentals?
Yeah, I forgot where I heard of it, but people like views and people like being up top. Like they like being high. Like say like in New York, like you go to a skyrise and you like looking down and like looking at like a scenic view. So you want to invest in a market that's pretty scenic. I've realized mountain communities, and this may be excluding the West Coast, but mountain communities, mountain cities are a little bit less seasonal than say like beach towns. Beach towns, like say like if you're looking at the coast in North Carolina, like in the Outer Banks, that's a little bit more seasonal than say like here in the mountains. We're a year-round market. We have our high season, which is going to be later summer, and then the foliage or the leaf season in October and November. But for the most part, like we cash flow pretty good throughout the whole year. So mountain communities, you want there's like 3 steps. It's like you want to be in a cabin when you're in the woods. You want a hot tub and you want a mountain view. And that's sort of the 3 things that we look for. So it's like, obviously hot tubs are pretty easy, but the design of the property and then also some sort of scenic view. One thing I always tell people that ask me that question is you want a foolproof way, honestly, is to invest in areas that are close to a national forest or a national park, because you already have a built-in audience that are already visiting these parks. Like, I mean, with COVID, like the national parks saw like record numbers in the last couple of years. Like I think that Smoky Mountains alone saw like 20 million visitors. So there's a shortage of inventory there in terms of like where people want to stay at. They might be staying in a boring hotel just to be able to stay in the Smoky Mountains. So that's probably the quickest way to answer that question is looking at markets that are close to national forests or national parks.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I mean, 20 million visitors last year just in the Smoky Mountains. I believe it. Yeah. I've been there many times. Speak to what's been your biggest challenge in this type of business, say in the last 12 months?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say just putting my team together. The last 12 months for sure is just finding good work. I trust my GC a lot and just making sure that my team is able to scale as quickly as in my mind, I want to. And so the team's a big one. And then essentially just talking to short-term rental or a lot of the times the investors I am talking to are interested in short-term rentals, but they don't really know too much about it. Maybe they're in self-storage, multifamily, mobile home parks, and they've invested in syndication deals, but they've never really invested in syndication for short-term rental development. So it's sort of taking them, if they're approaching me, taking them off of that and sort of explaining how the short-term rental model works a little bit. So that's my team, and then also just raising. The capital raising's been a little easy, but it's just getting people to have that mindset switch for short-term rentals. Because it's not like I can't guarantee like an exact number. Like every month is going to be a little bit different on the return. So and we're playing around with different models right now with like Class A and Class B shares for the syndication stuff. So
nice.
Yeah.
What would you have done differently? If you could go back, let's say, 2 or 3 years, or would you say in 2015 or 17 when you started? I mean, knowing what you know now, what would you do different?
Just a mentor. Is I would have spent more time and what I realized is there's a difference between a mastermind, group coaching, one-on-one, and what's the other one? And just a course. So initially I just started with a course, which has helped me out a lot, but I wish I would have done the research to find a really good mentor and put down a reasonable amount of money to get that mentor, because knowing what I know now, that as long as you do your research on your mentor, and that mentor is going to pay for itself tenfold in the first couple of years.
You're investing in yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the most important thing. I mean,
so much cheaper than a college degree right?
Yeah, right.
So,
I mean, I have an undergrad and MBA at what I've learned from, and I'm finishing up a doctorate, but it's like what I've learned from my mentor, Greg, I've mentioned in 6 months is trumps anything I've learned in formal education. So
that's awesome. That is awesome. What about, do you have any predictions, Alex, for the real estate market, and you can be specific to short-term rentals, say, over the next 6 to 12 months?
Yeah, no. So I like to tell people that the short-term rental market's I mean, recession resistant, I feel like, is a term that gets thrown around a lot now, which, I mean, it's important to think about stuff like that, but the rates don't tend to move with the market, at least with the real estate market. So a good example of that is like in 2008 and 9, the rates stayed the same for short-term rentals. The luxury saw a little bit of a dip, say like any properties that were sleeping maybe more than 12 people, 10 to 12 people more, but the rates tended to stay the same. It's like people just decided to, hey, I'm the market was bad, the economy was bad. Families were like, we're not going to take an international trip this year, but we'll still travel domestically. So that's what we saw was like the rates didn't change. I don't really like to look at COVID as a good gauge of how good short-term rentals were, because we were all trapped inside of the country. So people were forced to travel domestically. So I don't really see occupancy rates dropping after international travel becomes more popular again, or at least people are more comfortable traveling internationally. But I do see rates dropping a little bit, maybe about 10%. But that's still like we were renting out before COVID, and we were booked out 100% and with pretty good rates. And I mean, we did increase our rates for 2022, and we're seeing people book still. We increased them by 20%, and we're still seeing people book the cabin. So that might cancel itself out, where it's like we can charge more for the properties because of like people are comfortable spending a little bit more now because of inflation. But at the same time, like people are going to be traveling more internationally. So
yeah,
and it's going to be market specific too.
Of course. And my next question is kind of twofold as well. As far as short-term rentals and developing, like you're doing these larger projects. I love the scaling of, it's not just like we're going and buying single family homes, turning them into short-term rentals, which I've met so many people who have made amazing businesses doing that.
Absolutely.
In a massive way. However, I love the scalability of, hey, let's go develop 100 acres and, do a short-term rental business that way. I could get on board with something like that. But I wanted to ask you, when dealing with projects like that, how do you prepare for a downturn in that type of business model, in short-term rentals? And what would you even foresee maybe even causing a downturn on the short-term rental type development business?
Absolutely. So I wouldn't necessarily call it a downturn in terms of your city can one day just wake up one day and just say, hey, no more short-term rentals in the city or county. I know Asheville did it, where I grew up, Detroit did it. We underwrite the properties as long-term rentals. That's probably the most important thing. That might be a little bit difficult with how competitive some of the properties have gotten if you're looking just to purchase. But I think it's important to at least say, hey, like can we break even if we were forced to rent this out as a long-term rental? And that's worst case scenario. And there's different fail safes that we have in place for different stages of development. So a good example of that is I can go out, purchase a large parcel, any type of parcel, put in the work, get the engineering done, get the plat and the subdivision, like the land subdivided, and get it approved with the county in any type of market. And I can, if say like we're in a downturn, I can then and say like my lender doesn't want to lend to me, or I just don't feel comfortable with where we're at in the market to whatever happens in the market to actually develop this project. I can then turn around and sell that land as a land entitlement play to another developer who's probably maybe would be like better positioned to do something with it. So that's our first fail safe, is like it would be a land entitlement play in the development schedule. And then so between that and then renting them out as long-term rentals, those are the two fail safes we have. It's just like you never know with your city or county what's going to happen with the rules. Things are getting better though. Like I think with COVID, I don't see any city or county sort of pushing it. Like, because I mean, most of the city or Airbnb collects taxes on your property for your city already. So I don't see any city or county pushing tax revenue away after COVID.
Yeah, that's a good point right there. Yeah. That's a really good point. I mean, it really goes back to knowing your county or city regulations around Airbnb as well.
If you're interested in doing it yourself, like just go out and not even call them. Don't even contact them. Just walk into the county and ask, hey, can I talk to the head of planning or the at least his assistant or something? And I mean, they're there for a reason. They're there to help us in the community. So awesome.
Yeah, no, that's great to understand, and that you can just walk in there and talk to those folks and ask those questions. That can be very important. And kind of a sidebar there. Do you do like RV parking as well? You know, on these projects, or is that an option to increase cash flow or anything like that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we personally don't, just because of the roads that we put in. They're not. I don't feel comfortable like they're wide enough and stuff. Especially maybe like maybe, I mean, the biggest road we've put in is like 1,100 foot, but there is a community coming up. I mean, it's more like a hotel with maybe like 8 A-frames, and the A-frames are actually elevated on stilts, and the A-frames are literally all right next to each other. They're almost touching, and you can park an RV under that. And I think they are upcharging for that. So it's essentially an RV park with like a hotel attached to it, essentially. Yeah, we don't. We haven't played. I started to play around a little bit with like how we can gain more revenue through the properties. Pet fees is a small thing that we do. We do allow pets, security deposits, but we were thinking about just getting with like local service providers, like maybe like masseuses or like even restaurants, and offering either a discount to our guests or like offering some sort of type of commission thing, or maybe like with like wedding planners or something with some of these bigger projects.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. And we're all trying to do things like that, right? Like how can we increase the income?
Absolutely.
So tell me, what's your best source for meeting new investors right now?
Doing stuff like this, what we're doing right now. Podcasts are a big thing, just getting our name out there. And the YouTube channel that I started last year has been really helpful. It's mainly structured around short-term rental development management. And we have people that just want to do it, that who approach us that are like, hey, we just want to invest passively. And we just schedule a call with them. They talk directly through to me, and then we just talk about their goals and see what they're interested in doing. Yeah, I mean the money raising side has been easier just because people are gravitating towards short-term rentals right now, and there aren't really too many people syndicating, maybe 2 or 3 other people.
Yeah. What about some daily habits that you have, Alex, that have helped you achieve this level of success?
Yeah, Miracle Morning. I recommend that to anyone through Hal Elrod. I actually met Hal at the Bigger Pockets conference. I was like starstruck, which is because I usually don't get starstruck. But yeah, the Miracle Morning, the Savers, whatever he teaches in there, that's what I do every single morning. And then I've replaced the meditation piece to Miracle Morning with just a couple rounds of the Wim Hof method, which we were taught in the military to do before it even had a name. But now the Wim Hof method and Miracle Morning is the 2 habits that I practice every morning. Even if I wake up late or something, I still do it, say like on the weekend or something.
What's the number one thing that's contributed to your success?
This is going to sound weird. So I was a magician for like 10 years prior to the military. And I continued to do it in the military. And I've continued to do it as like a networking tool at different events. And it's been the coolest icebreaker to do like a card trick or something. And I mean, like I've put some serious time behind this. But what I've realized with magic tricks has also helped me do is like connect specific dots. And that's sort of what I'm really good at is connecting specific dots, especially with some of the creative stuff that we work on with the short-term rentals. It's funny. It's like you're talking to like a good group of people, a lot of which who've written the books behind me at the Bigger Pockets conference. They just like bust out a magic trick. It wasn't even like an investing question or anything. So that's a weird thing to say, but I would say like learning magic or magic tricks, which I've read in a lot of like productivity books, is a lot of these people, a lot of high achievers practice magic tricks. So I don't.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Definitely a unique skill set.
I've never talked about that before. That's funny. Yeah.
How do you like to give back?
When I was in the military, just volunteering, man. DC, where I was stationed in DC, had a really good like volunteering program with different types of shelters. But also the YouTube channel has been what I've realized the quickest way to give back, or just sharing my information for free. Just providing the information through the YouTube channel, I realized is the quickest way to reach the most amount of people that are interested in this.
Alex, it's been a pleasure to meet you and have you on the show. I love the business model of just you're even thinking through how to scale, the short-term rental business. And you're definitely doing that. I mean, you're syndicating larger projects and doing it much bigger than, maybe anybody I've heard as far as around short-term rentals. And so congratulations to you and your success taking action, right, on the steps. Having mentors and putting those things in place so you can grow that business. And tell the listeners how they can get in touch with you and learn more about you.
Yeah, they could look me up on LinkedIn. My information, all my stuff's there. YouTube channel is Alex Builds. There's a little treehouse, blue little treehouse logo, or they can look up my company that has all my stuff. They can schedule a call directly through there by clicking on the Invest Now portal. That's going to be sargoninvestments.com. I'm sure we can put it in the show notes. And yeah, that's probably the quickest way to get in touch. If anyone's looking to invest or have any questions, I'm an open book to this stuff. They just click on the Invest Now, fill out the stuff. I'll get the notification and I'll reach out to schedule a call.
Thank you for being a loyal listener of the show. Please subscribe and share it with your friends. We want to help you become the passive investor you've always wanted to become, but also the operator you've always wanted to become. We want to be the number one resource for your real estate investing journey. But go to lifebridgecapital.com where you can start investing in real estate today.